I would like to thank you for joining us today. We are pleased to welcome those of you who have been able to attend and contribute to this webinar. Today's webinar is titled Tunisia, Political Detention, Judicial Erosion, and Socio-Economic Breakdown. This webinar aims to shed light on the key challenges facing the country and facing Tunisia and the urgent need for accountability, reform, and respect for human rights. First of all, let me remind you of today's key points of discussion. They include, first, the intensification of arbitrary political detention and the use of the security apparatus to silence dissent, the erosion of judicial independence and the use of courts to legitimize repression, the collapse of economic and social conditions and their impact on the population's basic rights, and lastly, the role of international actors and human rights mechanisms in addressing these violations. Let me introduce today's speakers. We have Mr. President Moncef Marzouki, former president of Tunisia. He will share a recorded message with us. We will going to have it at the end of today's webinar. And we have Mr. François Costantini, political scientist, Professor Andrew March, political scientist, Professor David Miller, British academic and sociologist, Michael Ayari, Crisis Group's Tunisia senior analyst, Kaouther Ferjani, Tunisian activist, Professor Larbi Sadiki, Tunisian writer and political scientist, and finally Dr. Yusra El-Ghannouchi, Rashid Ghannouchi's daughter. So briefly, I will explain the presentation format of today. Each speaker will have 5 to 7 minutes to present his testimony and insights. And after all the speakers have finished their presentation, if time permits, we will have a discussion session lasting more than 20 minutes. During this session, speakers can add their thoughts and comments on the other speakers' contributions. And at the end of the webinar, each speaker will have 1 minute just to provide their final words and conclusion messages. Okay, let's start right away. And when the introduction, I forgot to mention that also Kaouther Ferjani is a daughter of a Tunisian activist, detained Tunisian activist, right, Kaouther?
Yeah, Tunisian MP and another member, Said Ferjani.
Thank you. And so let's start right away, and let's give the floor to our first speaker of today, Mr. Michael Ayari, Crisis Group's Tunisia senior analyst. Michael.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks a lot for.
Can you?
Okay, yes. Can you hear me? Is that okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I said thanks a lot for the invitation. So I try to remain brief. I'll just speak of the macro economic and social problems up to now. I won't enter into the repression or the juridical problem, the repression of the opposition, just an economic and social background. Just to say that since 2021, since the self-coup, the main macroeconomic indicators are in the red. Apart from the dinar, I mean the national currency, there is no devaluation. But everything is in the red. But contrary to what experts thought, the country didn't default at the cost of shortages, absence of public investment, inflation, growing domestic debt, unpaid suppliers, and over-indebted government offices. And what is more is that nothing happened, no revolt. On the contrary, there have been a drastic drop in protests since 2021. There is a president popular, thanks to repression, of course, but to the exploitation of nationalism, sovereignty desire, anti-Western feeling. It's apart from the same discourse that the regimes in Western Africa, we have in Mali, Niger, or in Burkina Faso, the fact of relying on its own resources. There is a kind in Tunisia of collective expiation in the sense that people say that they prefer suffering rather than be driven by the West or a corrupted elite. Okay, it works up to now, but until now, until when, especially? Since February, this February of this year, there is an acceleration of the social crisis. The trigger of the law on checks, old checks are no longer valid in Tunisia, while new ones, which many businesses refuses, don't allow for payment in installments. There's a change in legislation that means that many shopkeepers point to a serious decline in middle-class consumption. It's something new. Most transactions between wholesalers, retailers, middle-class consumers, and goods and service providers have ceased. And at the same time, the macro and the macroeconomic indicator are still in the red. There is also a phenomenon of social cohesion, delinquescence. There is a rise of prostitution. There is a rise of drug trafficking and drug use, especially hashish and synthetic pills. So the question is, are we at a turning point when what we call the politics of resentment, that is typical of populism, the fact of disclaiming responsibility on the others, the fact that saying that it's the fault of the other, not of the president, not of the regime, at the moment it's no longer going to work. And at this moment, people will be called to account, will give the responsibility to the regime. On the one hand, there are just two solutions for the regime. There is to go on preventing the formation of a competing narrative, the structuring of an opposition by accelerating repression. And the other hand, it's the fact of giving something on a social level. But the problem is that it's very difficult because of macroeconomic challenges. The more the regime will give, the more it will have to give. And it's something very, 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 very worrying because in the absence of public policies, as you know, because the state has been weakened and that it doesn't have the macroeconomic means to distribute, it will have to build the clientelistic system. But it doesn't even have the means to build the clientelistic system that the old regime of Ben Ali or Bourguiba. So there is a deadlock, and I'll finish here. The fact is that for the ordinary citizen, the only solution is a kind of radicalization, supporting the regime in the hope of earning the rare state resources available. And as crisis group, we were very worried of this phenomena. It means that there is a possibility of radicalization of President Said supporters that might cause violences, research of new scapegoats, formation of vigilance groups. And to avoid this scenario, as far as we're concerned, there is only the political opening, a national reconciliation policy, and a national dialogue that could avoid that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for Ayari for this insight. And now we give the floor to Professor David Miller, British academic and sociologist. Professor David, are you there?
Hello.
Professor David.
How are you doing?
Hello. So go ahead.
So I'm not very familiar with Tunisia. I've been to Tunisia and I spent some time there, indeed going on protests there in relation to Palestine. So what I'd like to talk about really is the whole question of normalization. So I mean, as we know, the Tunisian Parliament debated a bill to make it a crime punishable at the level of treason to normalize with the Zionist entity and the Zionist regime. And of course, there have been all sorts of difficulties in civil society in the period since then, in 2023 and since then. But since the launch of Al Aqsa Flood, there has been a resurgence of civil society activism in particular in relation to Palestine, which has meant the views of the Tunisian people, who are almost overwhelmingly in support of the Palestinians, have become much more important again in political life. Of course, the president for some considerable time since he came into politics has been a supporter of the Palestinians, and he was behind the attempt to bring in this law on normalization. I think the whole question of normalization is a defining one for Tunisia as well as for the region, because, of course, the push that we've seen in Palestine in the last 3 to 4 weeks, a bit longer since the advent of the Trump presidency, has been to go full on to restart this process of normalization. Of course, that begins with the Saudis and with the United Arab Emirates, but of course there are also normalization pressures in Tunisia, even in Algeria, and of course in Morocco too. So I think that the thing I would say mainly is that normalization is a crucial matter for the whole region, and it's a kind of lightning rod for all of the political debates that we would see about the future of Tunisia, or indeed the future of other North African states, because the defining issue of our world today is Palestine, and the question of whether Palestine can be liberated, the question of whether Zionism can be dismantled, which is the only solution to the issue of Palestine. And if it can't, then what we will see is a wave of reaction spreading out from Jerusalem, from Al-Quds, across the whole region of West Asia and indeed of North Africa. We also already see some aspects of that in the Sahel as well. So I think that it's important that we think about how this relates to the question of Palestine and the question of normalization, as opposed to just thinking about this in relation to Tunisia and civil society.
Thank you very much, Professor David, for this also sharing the information from Palestine as well. And now we give the floor to Kaouther Ferjani, a daughter of the Al-Nahda MP, arrested MP, Al-Said Al-Ferjani. Kaouther, you have the floor. I think you have a lot to tell us about this.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the Arab Organization for Human Rights for taking the time out to talk about the situation in Tunisia, specifically because of everything that's going on in the world. So to take time out, we really appreciate it. As you've said, my name is Kaouther Ferjani. I am the daughter of political prisoner Said Ferjani, who is democratically elected MP and senior member of the Nahda party. In Tunisia, since Qais decided to give himself executive powers, the erosion of rights through the judiciary have been rapidly diminishing. So this has been happening since 2021. Qais has been essentially holding the judiciary captive and initially dismissed judges that weren't willing to conspire with him, or even jailing judges such as Judge Bashir Akarmi. We've also seen that judges who don't want to aid him in the repressing political dissent take sick leave, sabbaticals, and even flee the country, which means the ones remaining are either coercively helping him or corrupt judges who are willing to work with the state. For example, many of the cases, including the case against my father, no evidence was provided in the 2 years of pre-detention. So not even fabricated evidence. I mean, this didn't even happen during the years of Ben Ali. And so you found the likes of my father's lawyer, who had been a lawyer for 2 years, he felt that his role was undermined, and so he even boycotted the final pleadings. So as I've said, my father in the Interlingo case, as well as Yusra Ghanouchi's father, Sheikh Rashid Ghanouchi, were both harshly sentenced. My father was sentenced to 13 years. Ghanouchi was sentenced to 22 years. And given their age, I mean, we understand that these are essentially death sentences. We have also seen that they have been adding them to numerous cases. And this is, I mean, the arrests have been primarily to anyone, any dissenting voice from any party, but the harsher sentences and the collection of like a number of cases has mostly been focused to certain Nahda leaders. For instance, my father has also been added to the conspiracy against the state case, which is possibly punishable for up to the death penalty. And where again, no evidence was provided against him. He was added last minute. And one of the ways that Qais has been telling the people for a long time that he has nothing to do with any of these cases. He's constantly deflected any accountability, and he gets to do that by also ensuring most of these hearings have been remote and closed, and so that the public don't get to hear the absurdity of the cases, and they also don't get to see the fact that most of these cases are political in nature. The judiciary has not been independent for at least 3 years now. And I just want to just add a quick thing on the situation with my father. For instance, the silencing of political prisoners doesn't just end with the arrest. My father, for the last year, has been continually isolated. Anyone who talks to him in his cell is immediately punished and removed. This has been continually going on for the better part of a year, to the point where now absolutely no one talks to him in his cell for fear of punishment. Even sharing a date with him in Ramadan had someone punished, and so he has been completely isolated. The conditions that he is forced to travel in to attend court hearings 2.5 hours away is just standing with handcuffed throughout the entire 2.5 hour journey, where he could neither stand up or sit down and has nothing to balance him. And at 70 years old, with previous injuries from previous torture, from previous dictators, you can understand that this is also akin to torture in how they deal with not just his, but many other prisoners traveling from either their prison to another court or even to the hospitals. And so we do feel like the government right now hasn't just ended their persecution of prisoners by imprisoning them, but even with the harsh conditions in the prisons themselves. And I just want to sorry, this seems all over the place. I just wanted to also add that with Tunisia, I think with something that Professor David Miller said with regards to the Palestinian cause. The Palestinian cause has always been a very strong cause for, I would say, I think everyone knows in North Africa, in particular in Tunisia, and in particular during the 10 years of the revolution. And I have to say, when it comes to the Palestinian cause, we have seen that democracy and freedom in our countries is one of the best ways to help the Palestinian people. It is why when we had the revolutions, the Palestinians celebrated. It is why, for instance, during the 10 years of the revolution, particularly the first couple of years, President Marzouki was not only supportive in words, but in actions, sending planes of help, and also the normalization had actually the normalization with Israeli products had actually stopped during that time. And I would say nothing is more important for the Palestinian cause than a free Arab countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaouther, very much, and also for this connection between the Palestinian issue, which is now going on, and what's happening in Tunisia. I'll have just two questions for you. First, very quick question. When was the last time you met or you saw your father? Recently?
So the last time I saw him was before the coup, before 2021. The last time we spoke to him was the day before his arrest, so it's been over 2 years, so February 27th, 2023. That was the last time we spoke to him.
More than 2 years, you haven't even contacted him at all.
We can't speak to him either, so there's no phone calls, no nothing. I can
And
only
he cannot have access to lawyers.
So he has an access to a lawyer, but the lawyers are very limited in what they can do. They have not been provided any evidence to work against. And so pretty much at the moment, the lawyers are people who note down what is going on. They aren't able to actually practice the law at the moment.
Their hands are tied.
Yeah, that completely.
Exactly. And the last question is, I think in a previous webinar, you mentioned that you are going to take kind of legal action abroad, not in Tunisia, regarding your father's lawsuit. Have there been any news about this? Have you taken any steps about this?
Okay, so in outside of Tunisia, we have collectively we have started targeted sanctions, as in targeted against the perpetrators. So we've done a case in the UK, in Europe, and another group has done it in America. And these targeted sanctions are against the president, the Ministry of Interior, the Judicial Minister, and the Minister of Defense. We haven't had much feedback on that, but we have also started almost 2 years ago a case at the African Court, and we had a positive response with regards to provisional measures. Tunisia usually ignores these cases, but with us, they have been doing a back and forth. And I think because of that, only a couple of weeks ago, Tunisia has announced that it is withdrawing as a full member of the African Court. So now they're still members in the sense that a country can raise a case against them, but individuals can't. And we think a part of it has to do with the case that we have going on with them. And I know. So with that, I think it's been looking quite positive because the provisional measures were already in our favor. And we've also opened a case with the ICC, and it's a combination with the situation.
You will.
We've already started, but we're just waiting.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a combination between the situation with the African migrants and the political prisoners. The deputy director of the ICC has seen it, and we have spoken to him. So that has started.
I wish you very good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaouther. We are still waiting for your comments after all the speakers have finished. And now we give the floor to Professor Andrew March, political scientist. Mr. Andrew.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation and for organizing this. I wanted to just kind of, in a second, give sort of a background to some of the legal mechanisms that Qais Said used to establish the present dictatorship. But first, I want to quickly follow up on what Kaouther said about the question of Palestine and normalization. And I wasn't sure if Professor Miller's comments were meant to be a kind of sort of exoneration of Qais Said or not. But first of all, it's very, very important to note how in authoritarian regimes or in highly polarized regimes, there are certain kinds of symbolic things that are often used to advance the cause of repression without being used to advance the cause of Palestine or other sorts of issues. One very, very common thing that's been historically used in Tunisia is what's sometimes called by academics a certain kind of state or authoritarian feminism, where the state's intervention on behalf of certain kinds of causes that would be perhaps in other circumstances regarded as progressive are used as ways of bolstering the credentials of authoritarian regimes or populist leaders that otherwise suffer from a lack of popularity or legitimacy in their own right. And similarly, the Palestinian cause is very frequently something that's used as a mask or shield on behalf of regimes that lack legitimacy. And so I don't think we should be particularly impressed by any noises that have been made under Qais Said. But even within that context, I think it's also important to remember that Sayed's intervention in this has been very, very inconsistent. Last November, the Tunisian parliament, or the Assembly of the People, was debating the anti-normalization bill when a letter arrived from the president instructing members to dismiss the bill or to postpone the session because somehow it endangered Tunisia's external security and other interests, and it was never really taken up again. So I just want it to be sort of appreciated, the things that Kaouther was saying, that this is not an authoritarian regime that is otherwise redeemed by its support for the Palestinian cause, which it certainly is not. So just kind of very quickly, I just want to just note for the record some of the ways in which, after the coup of July 2021, Qais Said engaged in certain kinds of extraordinary executive measures to suspend the constitution and exert control over the judiciary. Up until 2020, the Tunisian regime was actually in a direction of progress with regards to judicial independence and rule of law, ranking somewhere around 56 globally. There was considerable amount of progress made in this way during the 10-year democratic experiment. After the coup in September of 2021, Sayed issued Decree Law 117, which dissolved the parliament and allowed Sayed to rule by decree without any kind of judicial review. Following this power grab, he sought to reverse the country's judicial independence, his first step being passing laws to grant himself absolute power to intervene in judicial affairs. The next year, in February 2022, he issued Decree Law 11, dissolving the Supreme Judicial Council and replacing it with a Provisional Judiciary Council, granting himself the power to appoint 9 of its 21 members and himself holding veto power over the Provisional Judiciary Council's nomination of senior judges. If the council cannot fill vacancies with members that the president approves of, he has the discretionary power to appoint anyone who meets the qualifications for the position, thus essentially placing the PJC under the direct influence of the executive. Later that year, in June of 2022, he went a step further by issuing Decree Law 35, amending the previous decree law, giving himself sole power to summarily dismiss judges and prosecutors based on vague criteria, such as prejudicing public security or the supreme interest of the country, obviously subject to arbitrary discretionary judgment, and which has been used politically to target human rights defenders, judges, political dissidents, or even independent judges that refuse to go along with the president's arbitrary and politically motivated prosecutions, like which Kaouther just spoke about. These are obviously ambiguous terms, open to any kind of determination, and obviously violate any reasonable principles of legality, due process, and equal protection under the law. On the same day, June 1st, 2022, and without any prior notice, he issued an unreasoned presidential order dismissing 57 judges and prosecutors, accusing them of obstructing terrorism-related investigations, so-called terrorism-related investigations, financial and moral corruption, and adultery, according to various media reports. This decree law aimed to block any available means for the dismissed judges to challenge this order by depriving them of their constitutional right of appeal before the administrative court. It shielded the so-called president's actions from judicial review until a final criminal judgment was issued regarding the alleged misconduct. It posed a significant obstacle in enforcing the administrative court decision to restore 49 dismissed judges in evaded criminal complaints against the Ministry of Justice for failing to enforce the court order. Later, in July 2022, he pushed through a new authoritarian constitution to replace the country's 2014 democratic constitution. This new constitution dismantled many of the previous guarantees that established the independence of the judiciary. The 2022 constitution established a presidential system based on autocratic rule rather than the previous semi-presidential, semi-parliamentary system. While the country's 2014 constitution allowed for a no confidence vote to remove the president under Article 88, the 2022 constitution abolished this power. Article 119 of the new constitution divided the judiciary into three councils: judicial, administrative, and financial, making them easier to control. Finally, this constitution vested the appointment of the Constitutional Court jurists solely in the presidency, which obviously ensures that it is put under the direct control of the executive. So I just want to follow up finally on one sort of thing that Kaouther also mentioned, which is that there are a number of various kinds of sham political trials, like the Instalingo case, as well as others, that have been used to imprison political opponents. And one thing that might not be appreciated is even for a year or a year and a half after the coup, there were many independent judges that refused to go along with these sham processes and dismissed cases or delayed them or rejected certain kinds of evidence. So it took these kinds of authoritarian measures, changing the judicial system, but also more importantly, arbitrarily dismissing independent judges and replacing them with compliant and subservient ones to advance the constitutional coup that we've seen since 2021. Obviously, as we see through many countries, establishing an independent judiciary, upholding its rules, and maintaining the rule of law is the first prerequisite of any kind of fair and just democratic system. And one can only hope that when the present regime collapses, that this will be amongst the top priorities of any successor regime in Tunisia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor David Miller, and for this informative input. And now we give the floor to Dr. Yusra Al-Anoushi, Mr. Rashid Al-Anoushi's daughter. Dr. Yusra.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. I must apologize for being late. I had to attend the remembrance service for a close friend, and I'm very sorry for being late. And thank you again to the Arab Organization for Human Rights for organizing this important webinar and for this kind invitation. And I'd like to thank the other distinguished panelists and everyone who's following, particularly at this time when Tunisia is receiving very little attention, which is understandable at a time when we are witnessing the resumption of genocide in Gaza and the imminent threat of regional war and the breaking down of all international norms and rules. But it's important, I believe, to remember that our countries and our struggles are interconnected, and that what happens in one country can have far-reaching repercussions, as the example of Tunisia 14 years ago has shown with the revolution in Tunisia that inspired uprisings beyond its borders across our region. Obviously, since then we have seen setbacks, but even in the common achievements and setbacks in all those uprisings, we can see the connectedness of our region, and it's important to pay attention to all the the patterns and changes happening in our countries. So obviously in Tunisia right now we're in downward part of the cycle of change, with a clear authoritarian drift. Obviously, after the coup of 25th of July 2021, there were diverging analyses and assessments of what was happening. But right now, I think we have all come to the consensus that what happened was a coup against Tunisian democracy, and an attempt to take Tunisia back to the era of dictatorship of the pre-revolution. So obviously now we are seeing the return of the same methods, the return of repression, the return of systematic human rights violations, and the return and the growing number of political prisoners, unfortunately, something that we thought we had left behind us after the revolution. And I find myself talking about my father once again as a political prisoner, something he had experienced before the revolution under previous dictatorships in his 40s. But now, as the Speaker of Parliament, that was unconstitutionally suspended and dissolved by Kais Saied, and as a leader of the largest political party in Tunisia. At the age of 83, my father is in prison once again. He has been in prison for 2 years now, since the 17th of April 2023, when he was arrested on the 27th night of Ramadan from our family home just before the breaking of the fast, for the charge of statements he had made 2 days previously at the headquarters of the National Salvation Front, during which he called for national unity, and he stressed that Tunisia needs all its diverse political and intellectual trends, and that anyone who tries to exclude or eradicate any trend, be it leftists or nationalists or secularists or Islamists, would be laying the ground for civil war in Tunisia. So his statements were manipulated, and he was arrested for the charge of incitement to violence. But for that charge, he has still not been tried. There has been no trial for that particular case. But for other cases, he has been sentenced in 3 separate cases for different politically motivated and fabricated charges to 15 months, 3 years, and most recently 22 years in prison. And there are more cases. There are 10 separate cases against my father. And the list is growing. There have been new cases that are being opened and initiated against him. So Kais Saied does not seem to be satisfied with the nearly 30 years prison sentences issued against my father. And the reason my father is being targeted, as well as dozens of other political leaders, as well as judges, journalists, bloggers, and hundreds of others, ordinary Tunisians who just express criticism on social media. They are being prosecuted under draconian new laws brought by Kais Saied after his coup for against anyone who opposes Kais Saied's policies and his determination to reimpose dictatorship in Tunisia and to dismantle all the institutions built after the revolution, and to undo all the progress that was made and destroy all the freedoms that have been gained by Tunisians after the revolution, and for which generations of Tunisians have sacrificed much. So the return of human rights violations and the return of political prisoners in Tunisia obviously is a disappointment after so much progress being made after the revolution, but it is a sign that Tunisians are not accepting that this is the end of their revolution, and they're not accepting the return of dictatorship. They are continuing to struggle to restore democracy in Tunisia. And we hope that anyone who shares these values of freedom and democracy would support the struggle of Tunisians. Unfortunately, we find that nations that profess to believe in these shared values are turning a blind eye to these human rights violations, and dealing normally with Qais Said, and turning a blind eye to the systematic human rights violations, and also to Qais Said's incompetence. So Qais Said, who justified his coup on the basis that democracy is not delivering, that it's not bringing economic prosperity, and this convinced some people. He has proven now that he has not only destroyed the freedoms that Tunisians have gained and worked hard to establish, but he has also made the economic situation worse. Now unemployment is higher in Tunisia. Inflation has reached unprecedented levels. Basic goods cannot be found in Tunisia, and the atmosphere of lack of hope in Tunisia and lack of trust in the government is feeding a sense of despair among young people particularly, and this is leading to the rise of the brain drain and the rise in migration, something that Europe is obsessed about. However, they seem to be rewarding the source of the problem, that is Qais Said, and legitimizing his coup by dealing with him and by signing these illegitimate accords with Tunisia to control Tunisia's borders, which I believe will only make the situation worse. So, as I said, the struggle for democracy in Tunisia is continuing, and we are continuing to use all available avenues, as Kaouther was describing. We have lost any trust in the Tunisian judiciary after being controlled by the executive and being turned into a tool to repress the opposition. And the recent verdicts only prove that. So we are approaching the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the ICC, and sadly, Tunisia's reaction to that, instead of submitting to the rulings of the African Court, which are binding on Tunisia as a member. Recently, as you may have heard, Tunisia has withdrawn from the declaration that allows individuals and NGOs to submit cases at the African Court. And this is further proof of Qais Said's incompetence and his determination to isolate Tunisia. Obviously, we cannot predict where things are going, but we see a return of the same pattern, before the revolution of worsening situation on all levels. While there are there might be some outside Tunisia who are clinging to the myth that dictatorship can provide stability and prosperity. I think the Tunisian revolution has proven that completely unfounded, and we hope we don't have to return go through the same cycle again. Thank you.
Dr. Yusra, thank you very much for this touching input about what's happening in Syria and also what's happening to Dr. Ghannouchi. But I have some questions for you, Dr. Yusra. First of all, as I asked the Kaouther, when was the last time you met or heard from your father?
I'm currently abroad, so I haven't spoken to my father since his arrest 2 years ago. Prisoners are not allowed, any phone calls. And as for my family in Tunisia, my mother was only able to visit him once in the last 2 years, because my father has requested a direct visit without, barriers which are very restrictive. and any prisoner can request such a visit, but that was only granted once. Hence, my mother, who is 75 years old, can only deliver food and clothes during the weekly visit, and is not able to see him. And we are concerned about his health, particularly considering his age and the prison conditions.
Okay, and generally speaking, you don't have any statistics about the number of political prisoners, prisoners of conscience in Tunisia, and the state of press freedom and democracy. I mean, I know, of course, the situation on the ground is a bit difficult, but hopefully there's kind of feel what's going on.
It's difficult to put forward any specific number, but definitely the numbers that we have seen in certain human rights organizations reports in the past that there are 60 or 80 political prisoners are not accurate, because those are the well-known cases of prominent politicians, journalists, bloggers. But recently I saw the number of 1,500 people who were prosecuted on the basis of the decree that criminalizes cyber criticism, online criticism of the president, which includes very harsh sentences. So there are hundreds of people who are being prosecuted and hundreds who are being imprisoned, but we don't hear about them.
Okay, and of course, this also reflects on the people's, or Tunisian people's, participation and the refraining and participation in public activities and public and political life due to repression. Do you agree with that?
Definitely. I mean, there's a return of fear in Tunisia, not to the same level as the pre-revolution era, but I think that is the aim through these arrests and through arresting the most prominent critics of Qais Said. His aim is to intimidate the rest of the population and to rule through fear. I think the fact that there are still people who are protesting, criticizing the president, and people who are ready to sacrifice their freedom and risk prison shows that the revolution and the spirit of the revolution and the freedoms that Tunisians enjoyed after the revolution in terms of freedom of expression and association, they have not all gone away. People are still clinging to those freedoms.
Okay, and finally, there was some political activists who supported Qais Said's decision when he ousted the Nahda and when he did this kind of action at the time. But where is the public movement now? Where are those people, and why there is no resistance to his current decision?
Yeah, that's correct. After the coup, there was more division, there was more confusion. There were many democratic parties that did not consider this a coup, that supported it or put forward their own initiatives, including unions and parties and intellectuals and academics. But Qais Said has proven that he is not ready to work even with his own supporters. He is not ready to engage in dialogue with anybody, and he has slowly lost all those supporters along the way, and we have slowly come to the point where although we do not have one united opposition front, although that has been the aim, and that's still what we're aiming for, and that is the reason, for instance, why many of these academics and opposition leaders are in prison. Others not from another party, because they were engaged in these talks to bring the opposition closer together, and it's sad that we are told that the opposition is divided and it's not united and it's weak, and when it tries to unite, and they are imprisoned, then no one raises their voice outside Tunisia to condemn that. So, as I was saying, they might not be in one united front that goes out to protest together and has joint statements. They all agreed that this was a coup and that what Tunisia needs is to go back to the 2014 constitution. It needs to have a national dialogue that brings all parties together to discuss Tunisia's real problems that are the economy, and to agree on the required reforms and any required changes to the political system. So at least we have reached that realization and that consensus.
I'm sorry just to ask you many questions. My last questions,
Right.
for sure, is as I asked Kaouther minutes before, is there any kind of legal, you mentioned something, but is there any kind of legal action or on the ground that has been taken abroad, since you mentioned that you live abroad now, just to help with the case of Tunisia?
Definitely. Our aim is to make sure that there is no impunity. Anyone who is responsible for these systematic human rights violations should be brought to justice. And if that is not available in Tunisia, because the judiciary is no longer independent, no longer free, we must do this outside. And Tunisia has signed these accords freely, and it is bound by these international accords and institutions, and their rulings are binding. So we have applied for sanctions against Qais Said and the Interior Minister, the Justice Minister, in Brussels, in the UK, in the US. We have submitted a case against these individuals, again, at the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and they have ruled positively on the provisional measures, and they are due to rule soon on the case, whether these prisoners should be released. And perhaps it's, Tunisia's withdrawal from the African Court is trying to preempt this decision. But it's important to realize that, in fact, when any country withdraws from this declaration, it does not come into effect until 1 year after that. So Tunisia is still bound by the decisions of the courts, and we hope it will rule positively soon on these cases, which are for a number of political prisoners, my father, Kaouther's father, and many others from other parties. And the same with the ICC. We have submitted a case, and we are waiting for that to progress.
Hopefully it's going to work. And thank you very much,
you.
for your input and your comments. And please stay with us all to have a word now, a recorded word from ex-President Minister Moncef Marzouki. Let's listen to what he has to say.
Dear friends, as you probably know, Tunisia was the cradle of the Arab Spring. Unfortunately, today it's tomb. As you know, Tunisia is back to dictatorship. Sometimes it seems for me that we are back to the 90s with rigged elections, with the president elected by 90%, with political prisoner, and without any kind of political freedoms. Unfortunately, this is our situation currently. The worst is that once again we have massive human rights violation, As you know, we have more than 40 political leaders in prison, facing trial that has any condition of fairness. And we can expect that those political prisoners would be severely condemned to many years in prison. Among them, there are one of the best people I ever knew. Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi, for example, a man of 83 years old. And many other political prisoners also they have been really patriots, they have been fighter for freedoms for many years, and it's really heartbreaking to see them in jail, facing forced trials, facing persecution, facing harassment from everywhere. And this must be stopped. Let me remind you also that there are also other human rights violations in Tunisia, because we have these immigrants from Africa that are facing racism, they're facing harassment from the police, sometimes they're killed, even women have been raped. And this is because we don't have any kind of state or any kind of protection of the law. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, we must first support the return to democracy to Tunisia, and most important, we have to denounce this current situation to bring our moral support to the political prisoner. Be sure that we're going to continue our fighting for democracy, and that Tunisia, once again, would return to democracy. But for the moment, it's up to us to fight and to fight and to fight again. Thank you.
Thanks for Dr. Moncef Marzouki for this precious word for us regarding what's going on in Tunisia. And we also remember his term in office while all the Tunisian people were so optimistic of the future, and I hope these days will come back, and I'm sure these days will come back. And now I'm going to give the floor to each of today's speakers who have already spoken to have comments of what the others said or have a last word. So is there anyone who wants to comment?
I just remembered something, and I want.
Especially something, if it's something also you can share or you can confirm with what Dr. Yusra said as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much everything Yusra has said, totally spot on. I just remembered something with regards to the Palestinian cause and what's going on in Tunisia at the moment. I think there's kind of some kind of like Professor March said, and I said earlier, not only is there a fallacy about this pro-Palestinian government, it really isn't. We have BDS activists that have been arrested. We have pro-Palestinian activists in Tunisia who have also been arrested for Facebook posts supporting the Palestinian resistance, who are awaiting trial under terrorism. We also have, in the Interlingo case that my father was in and Yusra's father was in, last minute addition when we saw the sentencing, where Wadah Khanfar was added and has 34 years a sentence in absentia. So this fallacy of this current government being pro-Palestinian is not only true, but the opposite is true. So they have allowed people to protest, but to a certain level. You also find when Qais talks about Palestine, he doesn't like to refer to the resistance parties, or he doesn't refer to them by name. But generally, I mean, we've seen, as with all repression, especially political repression and imprisoning, the Palestinian cause is not exempt in Tunisia. And that is one of the things I just wanted to add there.
Thank you, Kaouther, but still you have your own turn at the end to comment of what has been said.
Oh, okay.
You won't miss it.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Now also we ask Professor David Miller to have his final comment. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for the comments they've given about the situation in Tunisia, and particularly your comments just now, Kaouther, which are very well taken. As I said at the beginning, I'm not an expert on Tunisia. I came to talk here about Palestine, and I very much take the points that people have made. That's all.
Thank you very much, Professor David. But anyway, Your insights were also discussed by others, so it was really helpful. And Michael?
Yes.
Michael, you
Yeah,
can
yes,
have final
no,
word.
no, it's okay. Just to say that, of course, it's a sad situation, but I think that from now, people, and especially the opposition, has to think of the after, because it won't last forever. And I mean, a political openness is possible, but the fact that it's opening doesn't have to happen in blood. I mean, I hope that things will remain peaceful and that there will be not a comeback to democracy, but I mean something, a genuine reform of state to gain a rule of law and much more liberty of freedom.
Thank you, Michael. And now we want one 2-minute word from Mr. Professor Andrew March. Professor Andrew?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for all their excellent comments. I learned a lot. And I just want to end kind of with a reflection and a question. As somebody that also now lives in a country whose democracy is threatened and to a large extent through either attacks on the judiciary or questioning the authority of the judiciary. And I just want to reflect upon perhaps a unfortunate or sad reality about politics, which is that very often political changes and the preservation of democracy is led by certain kinds of very politically active elites. And even if there are moments like in the Tunisian revolution in which masses of people are involved and in which political power is generated by that, over the long period of time, there's often a divide between politically active persons and the broad population. And this is one of the perhaps advantages of authoritarianism, that many of the things that people like on this Zoom call are most attentive to and experience most acutely, attacks on rights, attacks on due process, attacks on rule of law, affect most intensely those who are politically active, but do not necessarily affect the day-to-day lives of the broad population in the same way. And this is an extremely important challenge for anybody that cares about democracy, democratization, the preservation of democracy, transition to democracy or transition back, is that it's very, very important to think about the ways in which regimes are capable of attacking people in very sensitive places in ways that do not immediately generate the ire and the mobilization of the masses. And so that's a very, very important challenge in any place that would like to transition to democracy or to preserve it. And it is something that, I defer to many of the activists on this Zoom who participated firsthand in transition to democracy. And we'd just like to keep that fundamental dilemma and challenge on our minds. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will final 2 words or 2 concluding remarks. First by Dr. Yusra. Dr. Yusra, can you give us your concluding remarks of what you have said and what been said as well?
Sure. Thank you. Following what I agree with what Michael said, that the situation in Tunisia, shows that we should prepare for the after Said, era, and that's what the opposition is doing. They're not only working on bringing democracy back, but also on what comes after that. They have been discussing what political reforms are needed, what economic reforms will be needed in Tunisia, and trying to reach agreement on those points. But we hope also that international allies will also realize that Said cannot stay there much longer with his current incompetence. he's not only responsible for human rights violations, but the fact that he's changed the prime minister, I think 6 times, and had dozens of ministers changed, and has provided no solutions for Tunisia's urgent and worsening problems, and instead has only resorted to scapegoating and blaming others, whether it's corrupt businessmen, corrupt judges, the opposition, invisible forces, that are sabotaging his work, and or whether it's external forces, or African migrants as well. Recently, as we have seen, and as President Marzouki mentioned, very the president has resorted to very dangerous racist discourse and incitement, which we had never experienced to this level in Tunisia, with very serious consequences. So he has shown that he has no solutions. He can only blame others. He is not ready to solve these problems, and hence it would be helpful for Tunisia's partners to realize that this situation is untenable, and that they should not be legitimizing Qais Said or extending his disastrous rule, and they should also prepare for the after Said, the post-Said era, by supporting democracy and the restoration of democracy in Tunisia. And I'd just like to end by thanking you once again, and also paying tribute to all the brave Tunisians in prison and outside prison, who are continuing to maintain hope in restoring democracy in Tunisia, and also pay tribute to the families of political prisoners who have been dealing with their ordeal with patience and grace. And thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Yusra, for being with us today, and with this comments and information which we really need about what's going on in Tunisia, especially, of course, for Dr. Anisha as well. And now with the concluding remarks from Kaouther to wrap up what we had today. Kaouther, do you have your concluding remarks?
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo the sentiments of what Yusra has said, and also implore the opposition in Tunisia, civil society, to unify both now and even for hopefully the plans after Qais, and to kind of always remember the basic tenets of freedoms and human rights, because we've seen under every dictator, once they get rid of Nahda, that's not the main objective. It's quashing dissent, and no dictator will ever want to share power, and eventually they do come for them. And I think you asked Yusra earlier what happened to those that supported the coup after, well, some of them did end up in jail. So it wasn't just the fact that they saw they weren't having a share of the pie. They also saw that they were subject to the repression of tyranny. And so I would like, going forward, hopefully there will be a country after Qais, to bear this in mind, because every dictator has always shown they don't share power. Thank you.
Exactly. History repeats itself. And thank you for your input as well, Kaouther, and hope that your father and Dr. Anusha as well will be free as soon as possible, inshallah. And at the end of this valuable webinar, I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking part in this webinar, either by speaking or commenting or listening. And thank you very much for your precious time and input. And goodbye.
Thank you.